anything changed, mate, with the Hearns and the other fight in November?
All that I know is that Eddie Hearn has not confirmed a main fight for November 26th, and our discussions with him continue around the David Price fight and the Anthony Joshua fight at a later date, which just heightens the importance of this, because, you know, if Joseph can't beat Alexander Dimitrenko, the world title shot's over, and I'm pretty sure Hearn will stop talking to me immediately if we don't get past October 1, so this is a massively important fight for us.
As far as mind games go, if Joe was in play for November, would it be smart of them to announce that a couple of days before his fight with Dimitrenko?
That's an interesting point. We just have to wait and see. I think Hearn is scheduled September 26th as a date. It's 2 months before the fight date.
Yeah.
And I think it's something they do. It's a standard procedure that they do. So September 26th is September 26th. I don't know where that fits in our calendar. It's what, 5 days before we fight. So I don't know if it'll make any difference or not. You know, Joe knows that the negotiations are ongoing. After a certain date, we'll stop talking to Joe about that, but there's nothing to report just yet. No, Hearn hasn't come back with a firm offer on the table yet.
You're ready to go, though, you feel?
Look, Joe's ready to go, be it November 26th or be it March next year. Either or suits us, you know. We've had Joseph in training camp in Vegas now for probably a good 6 weeks with 3 or 4 monsters, including, you know, you've got Easy Ugonna there, who's a magnificent sparring partner, who's 6'5" and is probably pretty close to the size of Dimitrenko and the size of particularly Anthony Joshua. He also had about 3 monsters at 6'8". So if we were to go, you know, if Joe can take care of business on October 1, we go straight back into training camp with those monsters again, and you know, I don't think there's going to be anyone as well prepared to take on Anthony Joshua as Joseph Parker, as be it November 26th or be it in March next year.
You threw Izu out as a wild card just before in terms of those negotiations. I mean, how serious is that?
Well, there's only the way it works at the moment. Hearn looks like he's going to have to take someone out of the top 15 in the IBF, because to fight on November 26th you need a special exemption from the IBF board. And so one or two things has to happen. Either A, he can take one of the other champions, and the only two got, you know, Tyson Fury's locked up in a fight, so he's unavailable, and Deontay Wilder's injured. So the only place Hearn can go to get a fight for Joshua is the IBF. Now, if you have a look down the IBF rankings, they can take anyone out of the top 15. Well, Izu's gone into that top 15, and he's available for selection, and if they come back to us and said Izu's up now, and then we'll take Joe, we'd be more than happy with that, and we'd just negotiate a deal.
Do you think your preference, and Hearn has sort of stated his preference is probably to put Joe on in March and build him up there?
Well, it makes a lot of sense for Joe to go up there and fight on the undercard. One of the reasons we like it is to get Joe used to the atmosphere and environment. There's nothing like fighting in a stadium with 20,000 Poms. You know, it's a totally different atmosphere to what you get in America. I've been to a lot of big fights in Vegas and a few big fights in England, and gee whiz, the atmosphere in England is unbelievable. You know, we're at that Charles Martin fight versus Anthony Joshua, and you've got, you know, 20,000 Poms singing Sweet Caroline just before the fight. They're noisy, they're loud, they're raucous, and they're just the best crowds in the world. So it's an environment. I think it's a great advantage to experience that, number one. Another advantage is to get used to the hotels and the doctors and all the stuff that you need for a world title fight. And then, and lastly, just being in the environment. You know, that's what Joseph would be a great thing to experience. And of course, fighting a big guy like David Price, who's a big name in England, I'm sure the English crowd will be on Price's side, and it'll be a small taste of what Joe can expect in March.
The words Anthony Joshua were off limits the last time Joe was here. How are you keeping his focus on that? And how do you think his focus is going with everything that's swirling around?
Kevin Barry is a master at, you know, both Kevin and Joe know that there's no point thinking about anything other than Alexander Dimitrenko, and the reason is simple, is that the second they start looking ahead is when we won't get that far. My job is to look ahead and set everything up. Their job is to focus on the job at hand, and you know, Kevin in particular, he's been through this before. I can remember, you know, when they had the Tua versus Lennox fight, there were probably a few distractions going on as to what could happen. Kevin's learned from that experience, and I've got no doubts he's got Joe focused, and Joe knows that, you You know, we're trying a couple of new things with this camp, and we think we're very, very happy with it. Just little things like Joseph's mum and dad have been in training camp for the whole time that he's been here, and it's just to make him feel a lot more comfortable, you know, a lot more relaxed. I know they have breakfast in the morning, they have dinner at night. It's a pretty cool environment to be in, you know, if you're Joseph Parker.
Sorry, Dan, you may have already been asked this, but you're not worried at all that Joe's going to suffer burnout at all this year, considering how many fights he is lined up to have?
Well, we're not fighting any more this year than what we have in previous years. I think this is our 4th fight for the year. We normally pump out 5 or 6. Joe thrives on activity. The only difference will be in this fight, you know, assuming that Joseph Parker gets past Alexander Dimitrenko. Let's not forget, this guy's had 40 fights for 38 wins. He's been in with some world-class talent. He's incredibly durable. The only time he got stopped was when he went into the 11th round. You know, well, Joe's only been in the 11th round once, so I don't know how many times this guy's been, but he would have had a number of 12-round fights. So this is a tough fight. It's a risky fight, but it's one we thought the risk was justified, given that we're getting prepared to take on, you know, a world-class guy in Anthony Joshua. We want to go there. We're not going to compete. We're not going just for the fight. We're not going for the payday. We're going to win this thing. And this is the best way to do it, is get prepped by fighting big guys, and this is it.
Just to clarify with Joe's parents, was that in Vegas or was that here?
No, here.
Right.
So Joe went into the hotel, I think, Saturday. I've been overseas in Brisbane a lot, but the parents, Sala and Dempsey, are staying in the room opposite him, and mate, they're already having, you know, breakfast and dinner, and it's something a little bit different. And I just think it can't, you know, keeps Joe. Not that Joe ever gets psyched up or anything. He's always very, very calm, but it's just an environment that I think he's really enjoying. I thought he was very good last night too, by the way, on Story. Because that's actually, I don't know if you've ever done it, that's really hard to do. You've got to go in there and read those bloody order cues, and it's not easy.
Dean, what do you think of a matchup with David Price? I mean, on the one hand, he's a top-rated fighter, but on the other hand, he has a glass jaw. I mean, what do you think of him?
Look, assuming we get that far, and assuming that fight happens, because anything can happen in the world of boxing, it's a good fight. It's a fight that incurs risk for Joe, and I think if you want to get better, you've got to put yourself in situations of risk. We don't think it represents an extreme risk, but we think it represents a risk that will improve Joe as a fighter. And you know, like it's, you don't have to be a rocket science to work out that Joe needs to keep his left hand up. He needs to get his defence going so he doesn't get hit so much. And Price hits really hard.
How much will it help the narrative of that fight, being that Price knocked, apparently, and this hasn't been disputed by Joshua, knocked Joshua clean out in sparring, albeit a few years ago?
Well, the thing is, that fight's a win-win for Eddie Hearn, and to be fair, if that's a fight that Joseph Parker takes and we come to agreement, it's a win-win for Joe as well, because it'll make the fight bigger in March should he get past David Price, and as a result there'll be more money on the table for Joseph. So, you know, it's a risk and return game, but we're looking at purely from more than anything, get Joseph Parker ready to win the world title. That's our whole game plan. And we think the best way to do that is to take risk fighting guys like Alexander Dimitrenko, take a risk fight to David Price. Whether we fight November 26th or whether we fight in March, Joseph Parker will be ready, and we're not going to compete. We're going up there so he can win the fight. That's what the whole thing's been about for the last 3.5 years. Finish the job that David Tour and Kevin started.
Would you view Anthony Joshua as a bigger threat than David Price?
Yeah, 100%. Anthony Joshua right now is the IBF World Champion. He's knocked every single fighter out that he's fought over 17 fights. Mate, he's a dangerous fighter at any stage. But, you know, I think he hasn't been tested. And the day that Anthony Joshua steps in the ring with Joseph Parker is the day that he's going to be tested for the very first time. And I personally think, you know, that Joseph Parker will take that fight out, whether it be over 6, 7 or 8 rounds. Joseph Parker is going to be too fast for him.
Do you know what's stopping that fight from happening in November with Joshua and Pulev?
I would suggest the one thing that stops it is money. And, you know, Pulev has fought for the world title in the past. And one of the things was he fought one of the all-time greats who had an established track record on serious revenue. And Pulev's probably looking at it going, I got a big payday back then. This fight could end my career. I want a big payday now. So, you know, Joshua's only 2 fights into his bloody world title reign. His revenues aren't probably as great as what Klitschko's were. So there's all of these things that have to be taken into account. When Lennox Lewis was fighting for the world title in America, there was tens of millions on the table because Lennox Lewis was one of the all-time greats and accepted pay-per-view commodity in America, generated a shitload more revenue. So Anthony Joshua's only just started, so the revenues might not be there to get Pulev in the ring. Who knows?
Dean, let's say Joe is locked in for March to fight Joshua, but this fight between Klitschko and Fury doesn't come off. Now I know there's investigations about Fury right now, drug testing. So how quickly does the landscape change if that fight falls through?
It doesn't. What happens is on November 26th, the IBF will allow, and you can go and have a look in their rules and their ratings, right? The IBF will only allow one exceptional fight. So what happens is, if there is you have to apply for an exemption. So for November 26th to take place without it being Joseph Parker, they have to have an exemption. That exemption is automatic if they're fighting for another world title, like a WBA, a WBO, or a WBC. However, it's not automatic if they take a Pulev. But if they do take a Pulev, both fighters sign a contract that say the winner will fight Joseph Parker within 120 days. And that's clearly stated in their rules. And it even goes further to say that neither the board, the chairman, the president, the management can overturn that 120 days. It has to. So Joseph is locked in for one of those 2 days.
So if Klitschko was suddenly looking for a dance partner in that direction, you would stick more to the Joshua fight.
So you're talking about if we, as the number one contender,
Yeah.
right? I misinterpreted your question. We'd look at all options. You know, whether Joseph Parker fights against Vladimir Klitschko or whether Joseph Parker fights against Anthony Joshua. It's something that we'd sit down as a team and discuss, but that option's not on the table at the moment. So for the time being, Anthony Joshua's where we're at. I've got to be honest, Anthony Joshua would probably be very pleased if we were to go the Vladimir Klitschko route.
Well, then it would become, if you fought and beat Klitschko, then it's a unification fight, isn't it?
Potentially, yeah, and that would be even bigger again.
Do you think Anthony is just waiting for the outcome of Parker and Dimitrikov before choosing his next?
No, I don't think so, because they need to get a fight locked in. You know, they're set for, and one of the things, they're down for November 26th, and the reason why they've had venues locked in now for 1 or 2 months, right? And you can't change that easily because big venues, lots of demand up in England, and they're locked in apparently for a press conference September 26th. They've announced it in the media, so we'll wait and see. You know, the answer is it could be Joseph Parker, or it might be Pulev, or it might be Stavern. Who knows who it could be? But what is most important for us is to win this fight, because this guy is a big, strong unit and he hits hard, and he's going to be a risk. So we need to make sure Joseph needs to make sure he gets past this. I can't do much about it now. All I can do is support him.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much, Dan.
Sweet.
Thanks, Dino.